Hi, Dinosaur Bob here. We're going to be doing something a little different today. Instead of building out the geography or even the lore of Cartyrion, we're going to be taking a look at the game rules that'll be in play when we start creating adventures for our gamers. So let's get started. When I first started planning this video, it was going to be the first of a series in which I walk through each of the major character classes to demonstrate the similarities and differences between the D&D 5e version and the Pathfinder 2nd Edition version. But I quickly came to the realization that this wasn't going to work out for a couple of reasons. First of all, the result would have been a video with all sorts of tables and things that would quickly become confusing and probably boring to watch, and I'm already boring enough. And this would only be made worse by the fact that I can't explicitly cite the rules or show the content from the original source books because of copyright and trademark limitations. I know this because I actually did the work to get ready, and after looking at it all, I realized I couldn't actually display most of it. So instead, what I'm going to do is spend a bit of time talking about the conclusions that I've reached and what those conclusions mean for the Cartyrion project going forward. Here's conclusion number one. If you can build a character in one game, you can build essentially the same character in the other. If you're familiar with either the D&D 5th edition or Pathfinder 2nd edition rules, and you've got a particular character build in mind from that game that you want to play in the other game, you'll find that you'll be able to load up pretty much every feature, skill, feat, class ability, or whatever you want to call them in order to achieve your build. This is not to say the two rule sets are identical. Class abilities in one may be feats in the other, but in general, all the necessary components exist in both games and are essentially the same in how they work once activated in your game, at least as far as combat is concerned. This is going to give us a lot of freedom in the Cartyrion project. As long as I make sure that I preserve this equivalence, players familiar with either D&D 5th edition or Pathfinder 2nd edition should be able to build what they want. And, even better, if we do come across a particular ability or action that's missing from one rule set or the other, we can add it to the Cartyrion setting rules to ensure parity. Here's conclusion number two. There is a significant difference between the two games when it comes to low-level character survivability. This is because of starting hit points. In D&D, hit points derive from your class selection plus a constitution modifier. The range of starting values for hit points goes from the scrawny mage's 4 to the brawny barbarian's 16. That's assuming the barbarian has a maxed out constitution. This means that the first time that poor mage is on the wrong end of a successful dagger strike from a lowly kobold, she's got a 75% chance of dropping from the damage. In Pathfinder, hit points derive from a combination of your race, they call it ancestry, and your class. When the class contributions are the same in both games, the Pathfinder ancestry contribution adds a minimum of 6 more hit points. With 10 hit points, that same scrawny mage now has a better than 95% chance of surviving that game's kobold spear attack. The kobold would need a critical hit and then need a reasonable damage result in order to take 10 hit points out. So here's my thoughts on survivability. If you're handed a pre-generated character 5 minutes before you sit down to play a one-off session, it really doesn't matter if you die quickly, as long as the DM has another pre-generated character ready to hand you for the rest of the session. But if you spent a week or more getting ready for a campaign, and you've given a lot of thought to your backstory and motivation and quirks and mannerisms and all of that other stuff that'll make your character unique when you roleplay it, then you don't want to be dropped 5 minutes into the first encounter, possibly before you even get your first combat action if the initiative sequence is against you. I'm not saying that first level encounters should guarantee survival, but I am saying that a first level character should have a chance to survive at least one round of combat and not be thrown into doing death saves while everybody else is having fun killing things around them. And so the Cartyrion rules are going to involve race or ancestry contributing to starting hit points. Let's move on to conclusion 3. One of these two games suffers from what I call an inflation issue, and it does cause a few inconsistencies. In both games, almost everything you do, whether a non-combat skill check or a sword strike or a saving throw, is a d20 modified by one of your attribute modifiers, plus a potential proficiency bonus. But in D&D, that proficiency bonus is essentially fixed. It does increase slightly once or twice as you level from 1 to 20, but that's it. While Pathfinders is a combination of a training level in that given area, plus, if you've gotten any training at all, your current level. So let's look at a mage with a dagger, a simple weapon. Her to-hit roll is a d20 plus the proficiency bonus. Assuming she's trained, at first level this bonus is plus 3. But at 10th level it's plus 13. If that same mage had to pick up a longsword, though, to fend off a surprise attack, her untrained bonus in both cases would be 0. So what does this mean? It means that the better you get at your job, the worse you get at the things you don't normally do. I guess there is some wisdom to that, but I'm not sure I like it. Because this to-hit inflation is built into the game, it also means that there's an armor class inflation built into the game as well. The armor classes of creatures facing a 10th level character are higher than those facing a first level, in order to account for the improved to-hit rolls. So here's my thoughts on all this. As long as you have an automated character sheet that recalculates all your bonuses for you every time you level up, then it really doesn't matter whether the inflation is built into the rules or not. It's really only a problem if leveling up means grabbing a pencil with a fresh eraser and updating the 273 different bonus stats that need to be updated on your sheet because you advanced. From the standpoint of the Cartyrion project, this also means that any decision made about how to deal with this problem would also have to be reflected in the stat blocks of every potential enemy creature that a party might face. So if I want to use the inflationary rules, I better be prepared to offer some sort of digital aids to help keep track of character stats. Conclusion number 4. The hit point arms race is accelerated in Pathfinder. This is really another inflation situation. Pathfinder does not have you roll dice, hit dice, when you level. You get what the D&D people would call the maximum roll. So while that barbarian will gain an average of 7 hit points per level, plus their con bonus in D&D, she'll get 12 in Pathfinder. Once again, Pathfinder accounts for this in determining the squishiness of the bad guys that a given level character should expect to face. They also get more hit points per challenge rating. This has 2 effects. First of all is the positive feeling that players of brawny characters will feel when they look at their character sheets and see huge numbers in the hit point box. But the second is the disparity between brawny characters and squishy characters, which is going to increase tremendously as the party levels up. And since the bad guys are also increasing in hit points, it means that in situations where a party may be split up, with the mages and other squishies on their own, the game master is going to have to be careful about what sort of baddies get thrown at them if he wants them to have a chance. Yet another effect is that higher level combats are going to take longer. Here's an oversimplified math version of what I'm talking about, using some averages. At level 1, the baddie has 8 hit points, and your sword does 1d8 damage. You've got a 50% chance of hitting it, and you'll have to hit it twice for the average damage to be enough to kill it. So combat is going to take, on the average, 4 rounds. At level 2, that baddie has 16 hit points. Now let's say your weapon is still a 1d8 sword. Armor class will also increase, so we're going to assume that you still have a 50% chance to hit. But now you're going to have to hit it successfully 4 times, so this combat is going to take, on average, 8 rounds. Increased weapon damage will mitigate this, and of course mages will get tremendously more powerful spells as they move up, but longer fights are inevitable. Some people may like this, but there comes a point where the slog of rolling combat dice becomes tedious. If we go with the inflated to hit scores, we're also going to need to inflate target hit points, and we're going to need to make sure we look at weapon upgrades as well to avoid excessively dragging out combats. Now we come to the big one. So far we've identified a few differences between the mechanics that are easy enough to ignore if we've got a bit of automated help, and as long as we're consistent with our SRD sourcing. So now it's time to look at the SRDs themselves to see how helpful they are. And here's where we run into what I see as the biggest difference. Conclusion number 5. There are a lot more holes in the Dungeons & Dragons SRD than there are in the Pathfinder SRD. You don't have to go far to see where these holes are. Just look at the Barbarian's Primal Path class ability. When describing the ability itself, 2 options are mentioned, Path of the Berserker and Path of the Totem Warrior. And then the SRD goes on to describe the Berserker, but not the Totem Warrior. This is a consistent theme, too. Only one college described for bards, only one domain described for clerics, only one circle described for druids, etc. This means that if Cartyrion is going to have all of these choices, we're going to have to flesh out all the other options. And while I do expect to have to build out a few new options that neither SRD contains, it will be a lot easier to start with the Pathfinder material as a basis. By the way, one of those build-out options that I've discovered has to do with champions. Pathfinder points out that it really only defines the 3 good alignment versions, but implies that there could be champions of other alignments as well. I've already got a lawful neutral one envisioned, and perhaps others may end up in the Cartyrion rules editions as well. Another area I'm going to be taking a closer look at is the granting of spells from the domain selection of clerics and champions. I'm not 100% sure that I like the focus spell structure of Pathfinder. I may make this a little more D&D-like, but I'm not sure yet. So, after considering all these things, I've reached a decision. We're going to be building off of the Pathfinder 2nd Edition SRD as a root document. This does not mean that we're abandoning Dungeons & Dragons. All along the way, we're going to be making sure that we aren't losing any features or abilities that fans of D&D are familiar with, and we will homebrew them into Cartyrion as needed. It does mean that it will be easier to drop Cartyrion pre-made encounters, adventures, NPCs, and monsters into a Pathfinder campaign, as opposed to a D&D campaign, but perhaps we'll find a way to deal with that later. It also means that I better plan on some online tools to make it easier to use Cartyrion in standalone mode. An automated character sheet will be highly desirable, but we're going to need one of those anyway if we're going to make Cartyrion available in Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or something like that, and that is an item on my wish list. So that's it, no more waffling, decision made. And to show my good intentions to those who favor the other system, in an upcoming session, we're going to build out one of our character classes from D&D that appears to be missing from Pathfinder, the Warlock. And that's it for today. A nice short one. If you aren't already a subscriber to this channel, please help me out and hit that subscribe button before you go. Please also don't forget to give me a thumbs up on this video if you think it was worthwhile. And why not take a moment to leave a comment? Tell me what you think. Tell me why I'm right or wrong. I'll be back next time with some more information about the area around the Bugbear's Head Inn, the areas where our first adventures and encounters are going to take place. We're also going to need to get a few more entries into our pantheon of deities, something that's possible now that I have a handle on how to deal with domains. And so, until then, may the dice be with you.